Okay, Facebook. I am at the city building and the meeting hasn't started yet. There's a special meeting tonight at the city council meeting. They're going to discuss two items on the agenda. I have it posted above the video. They start at 6 o'clock.
Hey, welcome everybody to this special meeting on May 22nd, 2025. Councilwoman Hope on vacation, but we won't be starting. Stand, please.
Lord, I just want to thank you for the rain that we've had and the flowers that it's bringing. Just pray that we'll focus on the blessings that we have before us. Please bless this meeting, that we will do the right thing for the city. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, roll call please.
Counselor Turner.
Present.
Counselor Harless. I am here. Counselor Dixon. Counselor Freeman. Counselor Polk. Here. Counselor Landers. Counselor Graham.
Here.
Counselor Newman.
Yes.
President Stevenson.
I'm here. Real quick before we kind of get into this, so we are not voting on anything. This is regular meeting, so that's why we're kind of here. So we're not voting on any ordinances, we're not voting on any resolutions, it's really just for discussion. So, yep, so that being said, first item on the agenda is discussion regarding possible ordinance for the complete streets. So I'll let you consider that.
Could you speak up?
So I am not the expert on this, please understand. So I am just somebody, I was telling Julie, I am somebody that uses the roads for things other than driving on. So with other people, and as Ben brought to us 2 months ago, we have had a number of deaths. Some of them are in my district by things that could have been prevented. Some couldn't have been maybe, but some of them could have been. And so moving Anderson into the future means looking at things. Anderson was a car town, has been a car town, was a car town for decades. It's no longer that. We use it for lots of, we have lots of different businesses in town. And you go to other areas that are up and coming, they are very walker friendly, they're very bike friendly. And so anyway, so I had mentioned about that. Then brought this up again after we had our most recent death. So anyway, that's what this is. I have asked Brian here for MCOG. This was kind of brought to us, I don't know, 18, something, I don't remember, something like that. Several years ago when we did the bike in the pedestrian group years ago. So that's where I'm at now. Again, I am not an expert in this. I've had some people ask me questions and I'm like, I don't have that answer. I know this is not anything that, like Lane said, we're not voting on this tonight. We're discussing it so that you have questions, so that people do have questions. Will possibly be able to get answered. I also know this is not something that Sheila is printing off something for me. So yes, yeah. So this is not something, that's what this is. This is not written in ordinance form quite yet, but it could go into ordinance form. Sheila is printing up, the county has already passed this. So Sheila is printing up the county complete streets ordinance, so you guys can see that. But this is something that will take time to go into place. I know one of the questions that we had was, are we going to afford this? We can't afford to switch all of this overnight. I mean, that's crazy. So anyway, that's where we're at. Okay, so I don't know, Ben, do you want to come up and say something, Brian, and come forward?
Ben Orcutt, you need my address and things. 517 West 11th Street. Yeah, I appreciate the time tonight, the energy towards this. It's obviously an important topic. It's a clear and present issue. You know, we have a lot of people that use our roadways, not in automobiles, which is what they were originally intended for. People deserve to get around town any way they see fit, and they need to be safe doing so, I believe. I own a bicycle shop. I sell bicycles. I've been to multiple customers' funerals that have died in town doing a recreational activity. And it's just such an unnecessary loss for our community. It feels like we really can do something about it. Relative to a lot of other issues that our community faces, clearly this is not probably even the most top priority for everything that we need to deal with in our community. However, it is something that I believe we can really actually do something about. The Complete Streets policy is a framework, is guidelines towards moving our community into a safer position. And it's a demonstrated success. Lots of other communities have done this with lots of success. So I feel that we have a unique opportunity to identify a problem and actually do something about it tangibly. That we're not just guessing at results. We have a blueprint, we have guidelines, we have things to follow. I know Ryan and MCOG have been doing work on the data collection, totally outside of this dialogue. It's just part of what they do in terms of auditing our sidewalks, auditing our streets, collecting all of the crash data, be it automobile specific or related to bicycles and pedestrians. So he can speak to more of the like specific statistics in our community. But you know, I would really like us to focus on communities that have implemented things like this and seen change, which is definitely possible for us to look at. There's a whole bunch of cities in Indiana that are listed in the memorandum that MCOG has put together, but specifically South Bend has had huge success from projects like this. Hoboken, New Jersey is another one that I think is worth looking at, partially because there's 60,000 people, very similar to us in terms of population. They just celebrated that they have not had a traffic fatality, not just pedestrians. They have not had a traffic fatality since 2018, and it's on purpose. They chose to implement changes into their street design that have demonstrated success. So again, that's why I'm really focused on this. I think Complete Streets is a good example. It's a good reference. It's a good rubric for us to move forward and be referencing ourselves against. It is not the end all be all unto itself, but it has proven results, and I'd love to see us move forward on that. So hopefully that's a solid introduction. I don't know if you want Ryan to speak next on specifics. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, whatever is most useful.
Councilman Mr. Orpik, sum up what is a complete street.
A complete street would be a street that's designed to accommodate all users. So that would be pedestrians, cyclists, automobile drivers, and public transit users. We can also talk about freight. We have freight on our roads that needs to be accommodated. Emergency vehicles need accommodation. We can't go too narrow on our lane widths, otherwise our fire trucks don't fit. You know, these are all part of the dialogue. But the idea is a street that is designed for all users. An example of an incomplete street would be something like, well, Scatterfield is sort of the most obvious example in the sense that there is no accommodations for pedestrians or bikes up and down Scatterfield. There are little segments of sidewalks, but none of them are connected. My son goes to Eastside Elementary School. We have wanted to ride bikes to school. Our intention was to cross at Lindbergh. The light at Lindbergh and Scatterfield isn't green long enough for us to ride across the street, let alone having a pedestrian beeper, blinker, or any type of striped crossing or anything like that. So, yep, all users.
Thank you, Ben. Good to see you, Ryan. Here's a couple of questions. And since you mentioned Scatterfield, Scatterfield is a state road, right?
Mhm.
So the state would obviously be in charge of anything that even touches a state road. So are they providing any type of grant funding to communities to seek for these improvements at all?
Yes,
They
yes.
are?
Actually, right now we have 2 projects funded already through the state for sidewalks along State Road 9. They won't go in until 28, 29, something like that, assuming that they stay on time. Maybe another year or two delayed from that. But the state is already intending to put more sidewalks in across the state. And actually, this morning I just heard that they've decided to put annually a budget of $20 million for sidewalk improvements across the entire state, specifically on state facilities, starting in fiscal year 2027. So that would be July 1st of 26. They expect to spend $20 million per year specifically on sidewalk improvements across the entire state. 20 million is not a lot of money. It's not going to go that far, but it's a start, and that level of commitment from the state says a lot. I'll say the state as well has a complete streets policy. Actually, NDOT does. They adopted it 2 years ago, I think, and so they've been slowly rolling out improvements across the state to make these sorts of changes as well.
Now with respect to how you would like to see this approached, obviously, I would assume, and I don't know that yet, we don't know exactly where we stand with the state on funding for just next year's budget. The legislature tore the heck out of it.
Right. Yeah, that directly impacts down the road. The NDOT already has their funding signed for the next 5 years.
Do that.
Yeah, that's how
So
they
that-
have to plan and program out 4 or 5 years.
You know, when I served as board works chairman, we met with NDOT on a quarterly basis. And every time they came here, we were taking a project away from Anderson and taking it to Hamilton County. Now, they could still do that sort of thing.
Yeah, they can still shift projects around. They can deprioritize projects. It really depends on the governor. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Ben. Do you believe that every street we have should be a complete street?
And can I actually chime in before he answers that? So the complete streets policy as a whole is supposed to account for all users, right? That does not, though, mean that every single street will have a facility for every single type of user all the time. It does not mean that a bike lane will be on every single road, or a sidewalk will be on every single road, or the transit stop has to be on every single road. The policy itself is supposed to help us structure the justification of these facilities so that they're taken into account before the design is finalized. So a complete street can absolutely be a roadway that has just a street. You know, there are neighborhoods where that works just fine for bikes, heads, and cars all at the same time, and they're perfectly safe. So I'll just, a little bit of a counter statement there is that a complete street is supposed to take these things into account. It does not necessarily mean that that type of facility is going to have full elements for every single roadway for the entire city.
Okay. That was the point I wanted to make, that you're thinking on. You know, I grew up a long time ago, and I was told to stay off certain streets or my bike would go up. That was the bike policy. Do you think, I mean, Scatterfield Road, for example, to me would be a very poor place to ride a bicycle, simply because the speeds are out of control, the amount of cars, I don't have the statistics, but do you believe that those type of thoroughfares should be equipped as a complete street? What do you, I mean, what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that we have many, many, many streets in our community that would be safer if we had bicycle and pedestrian facilities along them. To answer your question plainly, no. There are plenty of streets that do not need sidewalks. There are plenty of streets that do not need semi-trucks. There are plenty of streets that do not need, all of these elements can be left out. The point of a complete streets policy is to put ourselves in a position where, as we're doing projects, as we're repaving, as we're restriping, as we're building new roads, we are at least having a conversation about, does it make fiscal sense? Does it make safety sense to put additional infrastructure on this given stretch of roadway as we're already working on it? So from an economics perspective here, the goal is to be as efficient as possible in the spending, to be looking at projects that are already in progress, or as we plan, we can start to implement this. At no point do I expect any street to just get flipped over to, excuse me, something new. Now, I think there is room for planning for thoroughfares in certain streets that could get whole makeovers, but this policy is intended to make sure that we have the BPAC that we talked about last time, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, making sure that we have a strong collection of people who care about an issue like this, so that we can be having these discussions with frequency. The idea here is to sort of flip the dialogue where we sort of make the assumption up front that we do include all of these amenities. And for any given street where it's obviously inappropriate for a whole host of reasons, that amenity can get left out. No, the expense of putting bike lanes through all of our neighborhood streets is goofy because people can ride there safely. So this is really a, sort of a common sense, sort of as we look forward, how do we work most efficiently? That's what this is.
Mr. President, could I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Have you seen any communities that have earmarked certain streets to accommodate all users so that there is a path that is designated as being safe? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do the complete streets. I'm all for it.
Sure.
I am, but I want it to be practical. I want it to be something we can afford and that we can do in a timely fashion, because I don't want it to take a decade to make things like this occur. But what if we looked at specific streets, the paths that are traveled the most, the paths that really do need to be addressed, and earmarked, a map out and said, hey, here's the safest route in town to take.
Yep.
Rather than trying to work backwards and retrofit, and we're cutting into the right of way here, so that's another issue too.
Sure.
But have you seen any examples anywhere that have just specific earmarked streets?
I think one of the ways that communities talk about this, especially as they're sort of growing this network, is yes, we have sort of corridors, sort of the north-south corridor. Columbus Avenue, for example, has bike lanes along portions of it. If we could really focus attention, as an example here, on Columbus Avenue, then yes, we don't have to think about Scatterfield or maybe some of the other streets as quickly, because we've established a north-south corridor that we can really point people to. Yeah, if we had sort of a network map that highlighted, some east-west connectors, some north-south connectors that we encourage cyclists and pedestrians to use. I would love to see those same routes sort of highlighted with, more public transit stops, these types of things. But yes, 100% that we would be focusing our energy on, if not explicit streets, certainly corridors, to make it most effective.
And I think that's also where the, pedestrian feedback would come into play too, is, having that discussion with AU and the schools and, for a perfect example is 10th Street Elementary. That neighborhood across the street, I have people in the neighborhood that contacted me, like, we like to walk our kids to school, but there is no clear, place for us to walk across. Can you help us make that safer? So I got hold of, ago, and I said, can we, David, who it was, and I said, can we get a crosswalk there very specifically from that neighborhood to 10th Street Elementary? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. We have one put in, and now the kids have a designated place, that they can walk from the neighborhood across. I think that's a good example of, this is something that needed to be done right now for obvious reasons. Not on 10th Street. There's a sign.
Talk
When I
up.
think of complete streets,
Can't hear him.
I think of, also what's below those streets.
Sure.
Okay, we get ready to pave this street. It's a major expenditure, it's probably bad shape. Is there anything I didn't see anything in the complete streets, thought about before major roads are maintenance, that sewers would be cambered, so perhaps our paving would last longer?
In the language that we've used and the language that I see in most complete streets policies, they sort of focus on the use of the street afterwards. So the language that we've been referencing definitely talks about things like landscaping design and lighting design, sort of the usability. But, no, to be specific, I haven't certainly included that. I haven't seen that included in a lot of other places. I do think it's a good idea. I like the idea of being as thorough in our planning as we can be and making sure that when we are spending money, we're spending it as efficiently as we can be.
Is there any estimate to take it per mile of what making that per mile complete streets would cost per mile? Is there any numbers for that?
For a lot of streets, it would be almost nothing more. You know, for a lot of streets, it's just about where we put the paint that we're about to put down anyway. Sure, we might use a few more gallons of paint, but we're not talking about curb width changes are definitely not required in every instance. In some, they would be. And so, yes, there would be some projects if we wanted all of our streets to be complete. There would be some that would be very expensive and not going to do in the short term. But that's why we want to set these projects up, make sure we understand where our biggest barriers are so that we can be applying for external funding to help pay for those types of most expensive projects. So, if you know the numbers of the math, the dollars a lot better than I do, but it'd be hard to be specific.
Yeah, because there's so much variation in what a street actually needs and which users it needs to be servicing. We can't probably put a number to what every single street would look like. We have to know what the specific design recommendations are.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking what, one of the colleagues on my left was talking about was, let's use one. From start to finish on the sidewalk. What does it cost? To plumb it up, a mile, a yard of cement, or pavement if it's necessary.
Can I,
When we're talking about bucks in the mud, in the cement.
can I speak on that, actually?
Can you speak up, please?
So,
And-
again, I'm not the expert.
Thank you.
But having served on the planning commission now for 8 years or something like that, one of the things that we have really started implementing on the planning commission is, for a long time, businesses would come in and they would apply to not have to put sidewalks in front of their new businesses, like new builds, that kind of stuff. So some of the things that we're already doing is saying, no, you have to put these sidewalks in. And the more we do that for specific new builds, that kind of stuff, then the more those sidewalks will start to connect. For example, at a flagship is a perfect example because I've ridden my bike out there a lot. That's a perfect area that, it's pretty safe to ride your bike, but if people want to get off the bus and walk to wherever, it's not a lot of places to walk. So that's why I really, in the planning with Mark and I, really started making a note of, like, no, if you're going to build a new building here, you're going to put a sidewalk down as well. If you're going to put a new whatever on, in this area, you're going to put the sidewalk in. So that's one of the things that we're doing. So again, he's not talking about, like, Nursery is getting paved this right now. And that's not, I will tell you, I've lived there since I was 11. My mom always wished there was a sidewalk, but it's a pretty safe area that we can then walk up to, University and we can walk on the sidewalk there. I don't know that we need a sidewalk there. So I think that's just looking at it, from the business perspective, or does this street need a sidewalk? Maybe not necessarily. It's a pretty slow street, pretty safe street, but there are some areas that do. So it's not every single area that, by mile, like you're talking about. It's looking at, like corridors, looking at areas where people are walking, like they're walking from 10th Street Elementary to across the street to the neighborhood, or they're walking from the bus to the places that they're working at, those types of places. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm speaking.
I think that's actually a really good example. And I know Ben kind of talked about this earlier, but what the Complete Streets policy does is it really flips kind of the design process, right? So the base assumption in traditional design ever since 1940s, 1950s has been we assume that the street is going to be there. We have to justify if we're going to add sidewalks on, if we're going to add trail or whatever it is next to the street. Or they assume, well, we're just going to replace it with exactly what's existing there right now. That's been the design approach across the whole U.S. since the 40s and 50s. The Complete Streets policy flips that and says you have to assume that all of the elements would need to be installed in this type of a project. We have to go through and justify the removal of those elements. Okay, so let's say not a lot of people are walking along Nursery Road, or there's not a lot of connections to Nursery Road that will need a pedestrian access. Okay, then you don't put in sidewalks. But you have to go through that process of justifying and then reporting essentially out to say, these are the projects that we've completed, and we removed these elements from this one and these elements from this one. There's no transit access on this road, so we didn't have bus stops included on this one. And you go through that process of justifying the removal of the elements rather than justifying the addition of the elements.
Well, if I could, I just have a few comments. I'm a cyclist myself and works on my bikes. But from a legal standpoint, there are some issues, and I talked to Councilwoman Culp about this a month or so ago. The way that this is currently worded, it violates the Indiana separation of powers as an Indiana code, because it's creating, if you look through this, it's got shall, the city shall. It creates additional work for city employees, additional hurdles. It's ordering city employees to do certain things that the council doesn't have the authority to do. I went and looked at several other examples of other communities in Indiana that have implemented complete streets, and it appears that the majority of them, it's more or less sort of a recommendation. Take these things into account. You should consider these things, but it's not ordering, hey, I know from Matt's standpoint as city engineer, this would be incredibly burdensome on him, having to complete all these different studies, having to do surveys of each and every project. When the city plans to either redo a street or put a new street in, that's often done 18 or more months in advance. Also, it's an administrative function. The city hires the city engineer. We hire experts, consulting firms. Safety is always the primary goal in construction of any streets. Safety, ease of use, all those things. You're creating a board which may or may not have anybody on there who has any experience in engineering or anything like that. I understand that board already exists, but I don't know that
Well, Matt is actually part of that board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
City engineer is part of that board.
The funding is another issue. I think we met the other day, I met with Matt, and I think the crossings grant's been slashed by like 2/3 or more at this point. There's not a lot of funds out there available. We talked about some of the specific requirements that are contained in this ordinance as worded, and some of them are extremely cost prohibitive. You talk about widening streets or anything like that, or having sidewalks, you're talking about having to get an easement onto property that the city doesn't currently own. You get in the realm of eminent domain, that not only takes a very long time to do, but it can be very costly. It's just creating additional bureaucracy, additional hurdles to get through, and getting things done. While the idea behind it may be okay, the way that this is currently worded, and some of these performance measures, I was just looking at a couple of these, that we're required to report on the rate of children walking or bicycling to school. I don't know how you do that.
NCOG has a lot of it. It's already done. That's the thing. A lot of this is already done.
And it's directing it's directing city to train staff on these things, creates all this additional reporting. And again, it's not just, we recommend that the city create these reports, it's that you shall do this, you shall do this. And that's where the problem lies with this currently, among other things. It's expensive. I just wanted to add those comments.
And that's why we haven't written the ordinance yet either. I mean, that's why I called you originally to help, write this.
Have you looked at this? Have you looked at what I have in front of me?
I've looked,
Versus the county resolution?
I've not looked at the county
Yeah, she
resolutions,
sent that to me earlier.
and I looked at other communities too. There were a lot of them that did do it through, like Indy did it through their Indy, basically like their version of InCon. It was sort of adopted as we recommend these things. There was another community that did it through their Board of Works. They're in charge of all, public improvement and public works projects, did it through their Board of Works. And even if you look on INDOT's, it's more or less just, hey, these are things we would like to see, but it's not creating a duty upon people to do these things. And I think by INDOT's own complete street policies, there's a provision in there that if completing a project using complete streets would exceed 10% of the total project, that you don't do it. And like Ben said, there may be some would be easy, you just paint lines in a different place, but when you're putting in crosswalks and things of that nature, trying to widen lanes, adding bike lanes, that becomes extremely costly. There's surveys that have to be done, and Matt can speak more about that.
But what I hear you say is, again, yes, I mean, all of this is hard. Like, again, this is why, I've talked to Lance about this. This is why we have not put this in ordinance form, because we work together. But we have to start somewhere. We have to start moving forward somewhere. And just going, well, it's gonna be expensive, so we might as well not do it. Let's just throw our hands up and walk away. That's silly, because again, having, even to the crosswalks that we put in at Payless, because one life was lost there. And we had one citizen that stood up and said, we're not doing this anymore. It was hard. David walked that road. It was hard. It was hard. We had to work with the state. We had to work. It was a big,
2.5,
deal.
3 years.
Right, but you know what? 100% worth it. 100% worth it. So I guess my opinion is we make it work this for what the city can do, and then start moving forward to make our streets.
Yeah, and if you're looking, some of this, looking at Madison County's here, I just saw it here in front of me, it basically Madison County may take the following steps.
Right.
It's the way that the one was worded, but then.
Right, yeah, and that's why this is not, this is not, and that's what I said, like, we
It's
have
kind of
to-
always I want to get it.
Right.
Take Madison County's resolution. Take what we have in front of us and work together to make it right. If you say take the word shall out, and put in may, great.
Right.
I don't want to make a decision in my neighbor because somebody wants to put a sidewalk in. Boom, guess what, Matt? Sorry, the $2 million budget's gone because we got to put a 500 foot sidewalk.
Right, and
That's not.
I actually was gonna bring up what you did about, because when I used to be on the plan commission, I know that ever since I was around, we've been very strict on that.
Yeah.
Any new business, any construction, absolutely have to have those sidewalks unless there is a very good justification or reason for it.
And I mean, even to, I talked to Ben about this, we did, when Main Street was done, we put in the handicap ramps at every single curb. I mean, that's one of those.
We do it everywhere we pay.
Right, so that's,
Everywhere.
right, so then that's one of those things that is talked about. So I mean, these are not,
Right.
this is not, we're not reinventing the wheel.
No,
And if you go across the street to IMCOG and sit down, I mean, a lot of the stuff you were talking about is already done.
Right, and that's,
Yeah.
we already followed the Indiana Department of Transportation Highway Design Manual, as well as, take guidance from some of these other things in here. But again, I think, the way this is currently worded, it doesn't work.
Well, we just need to change it so it does.
Thank you.
So can we do that?
So,
Can we take what we have here along with the county resolution, not an ordinance? Can we work together to make that where it's legally not putting the city, like I said?
I mean, as with everything, if somebody wants to put together an ordinance and submit it to me for review, I'd be happy to do that. I'm not going to draft one, but yeah, if somebody wants to present me with one.
just a quick response to that. So there are a lot of different ways to word these ordinances. The one that was provided is based off of best practices from 2018. And there is a lot of very strong language in there, absolutely, because it was built off of the National Complete Streets Coalition's templates. And they have a lot of very strong verbiage in their basic template. But there's a lot of opportunity for us to adjust, to get the ordinance just right for the city. So but that one was specifically worded to be very strong. And they have a way of rating ordinances as well. One of the ordinances that I referenced in the memorandum from Joplin, Missouri is one that I think we should also take a look at. It has different wording than the one that we've provided already. It's scored really well in the National Complete Streets Coalition for how they rate complete streets policies from across the nation whenever they're provided. And it would be a good opportunity to just compare kind of the verbiage there. But yeah, it was built off of best practices back in 2018 when we first drafted this up.
You mentioned ordinance, and the county has a resolution, is there a reason there's an ordinance or resolution, I don't know if there was a.
Because it's passed by the commissioners. Because it's passed by the county commissioners.
Yeah, oh,
Can you talk up, Greg? Can you talk? I can't hear you.
we have some bike lanes, 8th Street, for example, which is a little strange, that are inside the curves. Okay, so we designated as a bike lane. Take Columbus Avenue, for example, there are sidewalks on, would be what, the east side of Columbus Avenue. So does Complete Streets recommend that those bike lanes, pedestrian lanes be completely out of the roadway into a separate, with a, like a pit foot?
It depends. It depends on the context. You know, the complete streets policies are not prescriptive. They don't say you have to have all of these elements for every single street. You have to go through each one. You design. I mean, it's a similar design process that and this can already go through. The difference is that you slow it down a little bit and you include a broader group with the feedback. Sorry, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee that's already been established in a separate ordinance that was adopted, I think, back in 2018.
If you were going to implement something, it makes sense to start with low-hanging fruit and learn and build off of that until maybe more permanent resources would become available, perhaps through the state. I mean, nobody knows where this is going with the state and the feds, but it's clear that we're going to have substantially less money from them to do everything. I just read the other day where the state did away with funding for school lunches for kids in the summer. Come on. You know, that's what we're down to. So we've got to be careful also because we don't know yet as a city where we're going to be when it comes time for budget preparation, which is a couple months ago. It's already started. So anyway, it makes sense to me to get the low-hanging fruit, learn from those experiences.
And that's what, if you look at this, I mean, it does go through, like, in a year, and some of the things that they would like to do, so we've already started. You know, get the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee up and going. Get that group of these together, to form a checklist of what you would look for. You know, staff training, through this ordinance draft, reporting, the bike pack, all the relevant departments. So I mean, there's just, it is not, again, this is not something that we're gonna overhaul the entire city in a year, because that would be impossible, and it wouldn't even make sense, so.
I would also say that I think the planning commission will hold it around on sidewalks.
Oh, yeah, I do, trust me.
But they don't.
There's another thing to
They don't.
consider.
I do.
I mean,
The coffee shop in front of us. Those actually don't sell that equity.
Well, everybody that I have stood my ground.
I sit on there with you.
I know, but I have stood my ground. If there's one that passed, then that's stuff I'm telling you, I have stood my ground.
here's another thing to consider. Most, and we have to get the business here for the jobs, and I'm all in favor of that. Therefore, the economic development policy is we will assist those businesses with tax breaks, state training dollars. You know, they're getting a good subsidy, if you will, or investment from the city and the local government. So I don't think it hurts them. Just put the sidewalks in it, personally. I think that's an easy exchange. I hold on to it.
Just, good, Councilman. Years ago, I don't know how long this was, I think it was before our oldest nephew was born. My sister was riding her bike. I don't know if it was down in Nashville, or LA. She went across the sewer grate. I think it was going along with the road. You know what happened? She broke both her elbows. Now that the person knows the sewer system, set back and back. While we're checking the roads where like those checking rates,
Yes, yeah,
because if they have chain when you break your elbows.
yeah, absolutely.
Why street design matters.
Yep, that's something that should be looked at as part of street design. Is, you know, if this is a corridor that's expected to have cyclists on it, then make sure that the grades are the right direction, so that that doesn't happen.
And the drainage castings.
Greg, could you speak up,
Yeah.
please?
And the drainage castings that have sunk, you know, that's quite a jolt. You know, they need to be raised as part of the recreation or the mediation list. Some stuff.
It is interesting.
If I can just reiterate though, nothing in the ordinance says that you have to redesign every single street immediately. It is a slow rollout of changing the design process. That's what the ordinance is for. There are some specific goals in there. They definitely need to be reviewed before anything is pushed forward for adoption, because this was drafted 7+ years ago. So it's going to be a little outdated, and it's going to need to be updated.
I love what you said, Greg. I mean, you're 100% right. This is something that would be new for this community. I mean, that's always hard. And so you do want to take it and learn. Like, make sure you're not making uneducated decisions. You want to make sure you learn and as you go along. And if it happens,
You know, it would be, I mean, just another part of that should be trim trees along that street. And get those, you know, so those kind of things will all have to be taken in my mind, between the street. You know, so you do it in a whole package. So when you bid the thing, it's all in that.
and that's a checklist, making a checklist. Yeah.
One of the things that I'd like to see before or along with after this is written up in an ordinance. One thing I'd like to see before this is written up or along with an ordinance is this checklist. For an example. How many kids ride their bike or walk their bike? You have that list somewhere?
Just in
I don't-
general.
You
You're
don't have
wanting
a
to see the
pure number
data
there.
sets, Joe? Is that what you're wanting? You want to see the actual numbers
Yeah,
that
or,
we have now?
yeah,
Or do you want to see the sample checklist? Because the packet of papers in front of you has a sample checklist of what it would be that we would require businesses to do
okay. What,
for new projects.
where I'm going with this, the more information that we have in our packet, the better off we can make a decision on.
Well, again, I mean, what we would pass would be like, you know, that the bike, DPAC would come up with those checklists, and that would include administration, the engineer, people from AU, from the school department. So it's not necessarily going to be in the ordinance because we don't know exactly what we're looking at yet. It would be more like, again, kind of like this says, an idea would be, but an idea would be that the group would come up and present to, you know, the city, you know, checklist.
Tell you the truth, in my immediate neighborhood, I see more homeless people riding bicycles than I do, say, you for an example.
Yeah, all different types of people ride bicycles, and to answer the question about kids riding to school, I think the answer is not enough. We don't have a good amount of kids that are riding or walking right now because they don't feel safe, and their parents don't feel safe. So that's correct too, and they would make the argument probably due to safety, which is fair. However, I believe that kids should be able to walk and bike to school. I think that we should try to increase those numbers. So we need to get the hard number about where we're at right now so that we can track our progress. But I'd like to think we agree about the fact that we want to see more kids walking and biking to school. We want to see more active transportation, not just amongst kids. It's healthier for our citizens. It's healthier for our whole communities. There's a lot of people that have more of the healthcare perspective. I mean, we could talk about economic development as well. As South Bend did this, they did a lot of one-way to two-way street conversion in their downtown, implementing complete streets. And they claim $90 million of private investment in their downtown as a direct result of that. Kokomo did similar work. They claim a 40% increase in small business development after they went to two-way streets in their downtown. So, yes, some of these projects will cost money, as things do. However, the economic upside of initiatives like this are pretty massive. I mean, just to state the obvious, as young families look to relocate, as we want to attract those people to our community, things like bike and pedestrian facilities are base level at this point. If they don't see those things in this community, they're not going to be as likely to be here. So this is really putting us onto a path that we're already kind of late to join. I'm not sure how many cities in the state of Indiana already have these policies, but at least 10, is that safe to say? And many of those were passed 10, 15 years ago. And again, they've seen results. So we really have a good opportunity here to push ourselves into the future.
Any other questions from council?
I have another question. Ryan, do you guys have data that includes whether or not the people affected in these incidents were using the pathways as intended to begin with? Are we talking about?
Not directly. I would have to comb through. Each one of them has a narrative that's provided in the police report. And so we have to read through each police report and then determine if that's covered.
So you don't know either then who is actually at fault for these instances either?
No.
Okay. The reason I ask, and I'm pretty sure you can tell why I would ask such a thing, is because we do have an enormous homeless population here that does travel by foot. They do travel on bike and moped, and just based on observation, this is not speculation either. This is being a witness to it. People who just don't follow the street rules, the laws, and do what they want to do and don't have any regard for anyone else. In this town, do you think that a Complete Streets project is going to prevent that?
Not 100%, but absolutely it is the direction to go to help start that conversation. And there should be education and outreach that's done beyond that. There are many, many complex problems that go way beyond what any sort of policy can directly address. Housing issue. This isn't going to get to a housing issue or addressing that directly. It may spur new development and investment if people see that the community is invested in these types of opportunities and elements. Then yes, but not directly address that. No.
I do agree that we need to move in this direction. We most definitely do. But I don't want people to get the wrong impression here, because even in areas that have Complete Streets projects, they still have those people who do whatever they want to do and still have numbers like these. I personally would like to know if these are victims or offenders, or what exactly was the context behind why this occurred, because I think that very much has a part to play here too. It's not just looking at the data sets and saying, well, we had X amount of things happening here, well, why did they happen? I think that's just as important as the fact that the incident occurred itself.
So I know one of them, and I think it was 23, I happen to know this situation. And the reason this happened, this person, was on a bicycle, and he was hit and killed. And he was filled kind of with my jeans, and it was not one bit. And so, and it's late, but she wasn't doing anything, like her driver wasn't doing anything wrong. So, could that have been prevented? Maybe. Maybe lighting one better, maybe, maybe not, it maybe would have mattered, but, man, I just feel like I was making, I mean, like, and I know you're not seeing this, it was easy to just do that one.
No,
And
no,
I know that's-
and accidents do happen.
I know that's not what you're saying, but I just, you know, I think, again, look back, I don't like them looking at what if, but if there had been better lighting, if there had been, you know, this, you know, scattered, if there had been a sidewalk, you know, I don't know.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from the audience?
Real quick,
You need to come to
I
the
do have
mic
to
and
introduce
state your
myself.
name.
Thomas Willett, Indiana Public Radio. The data from this sheet, is there a source for this? I don't see one listed.
It comes directly from the statewide database for crashes.
Statewide database for crashes?
Yeah, it's called ARIES, ARIES.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay,
I would like to make one statement. And I'll just be real brief. And I applaud you for looking at some of these things. I would definitely ask you to stay away from your shalls and plus and all these other things. You made a comment, you talked to Matt earlier and suggested the counties look at it, and it obviously doesn't disagree anything like what this did. But the one thing I want to point out is, my house is with me, and he's our licensed by the state of Indiana city engineer. And he's charged with designing these streets. And every bit of street that he does, safety is one of the things paramount that he looks at. And no one's given him any credit whatsoever for that. I mean, I asked him himself, Ryan, have you talked to him? Yeah.
We talk all the time.
Did you talk to him specifically about this?
Well, I honestly, I didn't know about this until last Monday, just Monday this week.
But my point is, that's our main person that designs and redoes all the streets. And a lot of this complete street, if it's new construction, just like what you were talking about, sewers and stuff, we're not gonna put those under the street. We learned those lessons from years ago. They go out to the side. That's why we have paths. And you look at these other areas where they're talking about you got walk paths, they're not on the street, they're not by a curb, they're off to the side. If it's safer, we've learned those things. I don't want Matt to be sitting here and you guys act like he's not designing things safely, and that's not a paramount concern to him because it's most of the topic is every conversation I have with him with that.
Well, I agree.
Nobody's
Done a great
really
job.
saying that.
Great job on that.
I wasn't interpreting it like that.
So you
I appreciate-
you don't know who you
Oh,
are.
Matt House. I wasn't interpreting it like that. You were taking. They were saying that about me. I just want to say that I was talking about also Ryan. Ryan and I have been meeting over the past couple of years, talking about a lot of safety issues. So we do a lot of this stuff kind of informally. And I think, you know, the policy, the general idea of complete streets is obviously a good thing. I'm a big supporter of safe streets. There are a couple things in here that are a little, the language is a little strong maybe compared to what might be realistic from personnel in my office, which is just me. So I just want to jump up there and I don't want Ryan to think that, me and Ryan are working together pretty well on other safety things. And I think that police streets are a good idea in general. And we do some of that stuff already. And so that's what I would say.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just a quick response to that. Matt and I do work great together. We talk all the time. We talk about crashes. If he's looking at a location for design, the two of us will have a quick meeting. Or if he's interested in my input on it, he'll reach out and ask what I think. And if I identify a location that has a lot of crashes, I'll reach out and notify him of that. But the purpose of adopting an ordinance is to go above and beyond the existing staff. Right, just because we have a great working relationship doesn't mean that whoever the next city engineer is, or whoever the next person in my position is at the EPO is gonna have that great of a working relationship, or is gonna have as good of a design process as Matt currently has. So you adopt an ordinance to go up above and beyond the existing staff, right? You don't adopt it around the people who are current, right? And absolutely nothing from this man.
Well, you guys are saying we need to start somewhere. There's no recognition there of what he's doing right now.
Yeah, no, that.
What
that's
is
a
he
great
doing?
point. I absolutely do not mean to make it off like that at all.
Any other questions?
I got a comment for Mr. House. My house don't rattle anymore. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, I just want to bring this, bring everybody here to go over this, obviously, we can do some tweaking. Take out the shalls or whatever it is, but I think, you know, before this resolution, or before this ordinance comes before council, we gotta leave this on this.
I mean, if you read the states, if you read Madison counties, both of those are very, very good.
I agree, that's why we just got the county one, so I said the same, it's.
And I knew a lot of people would have lots of questions.
So that's it. And this is the other comment, real quick, I did have something on here about shading, I'm not gonna discuss that today, because I gotta have some conversation with, yeah, but,
Can I make it completely unrelated?
unrelated?
Yeah, unrelated to the discussion. When we, is the floor open? How does that work?
No, I'm sorry.
Not a special meeting.
But anyway, I was gonna talk a little bit about the shading line retention pond, and I'm not, because I need some more information, so. I'm not gonna let that in.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I would like to close this meeting, please.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Okay, good.
You guys all have a good weekend.
Thanks, Paul.
Have fun Sunday.
Well, they took the second item off the agenda, so the meeting is adjourned. So that's it for this week. See you next week. Bye.